our athletics update, COVID-19. See you safely back. Athletics update. We're here with our director of athletics, Terry Bozel. I believe we're just coming live now.
There you go.
There we go. So I'm Stephen Olveda, your sports information director, here for our CU Athletics Safely Back COVID-19 update. We're here with our director of athletics, Terry Bozel, our associate director of athletics, Doug Aiken, and our director of sports medicine, Pamela Gibbons. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to go real quick. Everybody's going to tell you their part of the plan so far, give you an update on their area, and then we'll go to take some questions. Go ahead and leave your questions in the chat, and we'll get to those as soon as we can. All right, so first we'll go to Coach Bozel. Go ahead and take it away.
Hi, everyone. Hey, welcome to be on this town hall. And, we just thought it was real important to get some information out to you as it came into us. It's been 3.5 months basically since the time we shut down on March 11th. And we didn't think we would be in this position come June 22nd, that we'd be talking about our fall sports and what that's going to look like. So we wanted to give you an update. Nothing's really happened until this past Wednesday, and that's why we decided to come on right now. The conference presidents, the SCIAC conference presidents got together, and they voted that being a big if we have fall sports, that it will be conference only competition, conference only. And with that, as long as 4 teams elect to continue to keep playing, we will have a conference schedule and an automatic bid to the NCAA playoffs in all of our fall sports. So it's going to be an institutional decision on if and what sports are played in the fall between the 9 SCIAC institutions. But a lot of this is going to be regulated by the state and county regulations as they're coming down to us. And that's why we're kind of held up here at Chapman on exactly what we're able to do, is because we haven't really got any directions from the state and county yet. I know that the state has been publishing COVID-19 guidelines for different sectors of the population, and the one for higher education that affects us has not been out yet. So we're kind of put on hold until that happens. So that's kind of where we're at. There's a lot to cover. I'm sure you have a lot of questions. You might be frustrated like we are. There's not a lot of answers, but we'll do our best to answer them as they come in. So I'm gonna turn that over to the Associate Athletic Director, Doug Aiken, to say his part, and then we'll get to we want to leave most of this time for you guys to ask questions and be able to answer what's on your mind. So hand it over to Doug. Coach, you're muted.
You gotta unmute yourself, Doug.
All right, there we go. Thanks everyone for joining us. Just wanted to share a little bit about where we're at from an NCAA perspective. I know there are some returning athletes out there that have questions about eligibility, and so I just want to address that a little bit. Other than the blanket waiver that came from the NCAA for our spring 2020 athletes, there hasn't been anything new. What that waiver did was provide an additional year of eligibility and 1 additional semester of eligibility. You get 10 full-time semesters to utilize your eligibility. And so our spring 2020 athletes basically will get a 5th year of eligibility and an 11th semester. Beyond that, as things develop here for the fall and even potentially for the winter, right now the NCAA has not made any statements as far as eligibility in case things get canceled. Those would be kind of on a case-by-case basis. And then if it gets to the point where it was this spring where everything gets shut down, then obviously there's that precedent that the NCAA has set that they would probably start to look at restoring some eligibility in that case. Currently, NCAA Championships Committee is discussing the structure and timeframes of fall championships and what what it might look like if there's a number of Division III institutions that do cancel, how many schools would be necessary for them to sponsor an NCAA championship event, and what the flexibility of the seasons might look like and the timing of each season. There's ideas floating around that you may have heard about pushing up the start of seasons where they normally are, or even pushing back the start of seasons. Those are all just ideas right now, but the NCAA is looking into potentially how that might affect their championship schedule. As some of you have heard, the NCAA did announce that Division III schools can start bringing back athletes as early as August 10th. This is permissive legislation because of the questions surrounding when sports could start, because they might be moving up some seasons. The NCAA said we would allow you to come back as early as August 10th. To allow for some of that resocialization of coming back and getting healthy before they start playing games. That does not mean that Chapman athletes are coming back on August 10th, and that has yet to be decided. Right now, at this point, we are not talking about starting any sports early, so August 10th probably would not make sense as far as having athletes on campus that early. And so that's still something that is being discussed, and once we figure out when and if our fall sports will be starting, then we'll talk and we'll kind of work backwards as to when we can maybe welcome them back to campus. Academic requirements will remain unchanged. So student athletes are still going to be responsible for 24 units in each academic year, a minimum 2.0 GPA. But that resocialization plan is really the key, and I know Pam's going to talk a lot more about that. It's a 4 to 6 week potentially resocialization and acclimatization for our athletes to get back on campus and start practicing before they're able to start playing games. It's going to be a phased approach for not just our students coming back, but also sport by sport. And we're kind of in a position right now where we would like to make each decision on a sport by sport basis rather than kind of a blanket decision and cancel all sports. That could still happen, but right now we're really trying to look at the different sports and the different risk factor involved with each sport, and maybe some sports can be allowed under certain circumstances where others may not be. At this time, and I look forward to your questions, but at this time I want to pass things off to our Director of Sports Medicine and Athletic Training, Pam Gibbons.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. Yeah, I do want to talk just briefly about that resocialization period. The resocialization period could be as long as 6 weeks, and it will be a phased approach starting with small groups. It could be shortened depending on what we're able to accomplish in the off season, but we are really focused on resocialization as well as reconditioning before we begin getting into sports specific and competition. In order to be able to accomplish these goals as far as getting back to competition, there's still a process that is going to need to be completed by all student athletes, and this is the medical eligibility process. You've been receiving emails from me periodically, usually about once a week. All of the information that you need is on the athletics website. If you go to Medical Inside Athletics and then Athletic Training, there's a link to the medical eligibility forms. There's a step-by-step tutorial for new student athletes as well as returning student athletes. In this tutorial, you'll have links to the forms that are required for all student athletes, new and returning. There are multiple steps to this medical eligibility process, not just completing these forms, but there's a health and safety portal that is going to provide some education in regard to concussion and drug testing, as well as the number of forms that can be signed electronically. And all of this information gets put into our sportswear or SWOL123.net. New student athletes are going to need to join sportswear. Important that you use your Chapman student email when you join sportswear. And then once you get in, you'll be able to upload your forms and complete all of your requirements. The first step really is accessing this tutorial, which has been attached in all of the email communications that you've either gotten from me or from your coach, and then scheduling that physician appointment. That physician appointment is going to be really important. Those are maybe ways out, and with the prospect of coming in early or starting things early, we are still looking at an August 1st soft deadline for all of these forms and completing these processes. So I encourage you to go ahead and get that appointment scheduled, and then get this process taken care of so that you are ready to begin whenever it is that we are allowed to begin. That is all I got.
All right, well, we see we've gotten several questions coming in. We have some questions that were submitted before the event started, and we'd like to get to some of those first. So the first one for Coach Boesel here, we covered it a little bit, but championships for SCIAC championships and NCAA championships, will those still be conducted if we do indeed have the fall season? Again, emphasize that it is an if still. It is the SCIAC made it, said it is the institutional decision and whether or not to compete in athletics. So we are talking an if still.
Yes, as far as the SCIAC championships, like I said before, as long as there's a minimum of 4 teams competing, we will continue with our SCIAC schedule and the championship for an automatic berth in the NCAA tournament. As far as the NCAA championships go, as of right now today, the NCAA is moving forward with all their fall championships schedule as scheduled on the dates that they previously talked about. As Coach Aiken talked about earlier, there has been talk about possibly moving those up and or back depending on what happens with the coronavirus as we move forward.
And then we'll probably kick this one over to Pam, or all of you can probably come in on it. But Pam, there's questions about the weight room, and beyond that, there's just the safety of the student athletes. If cases continue to spike, what are we doing for the safety of the student athletes to prevent the spread of the COVID virus?
So we've got a pretty extensive plan in place to address health and safety. You can find that on the CU Safely Back website. Some specifics are going to be in regard to increasing sterilization and cleaning, disinfecting, the wearing of face coverings by all participants in passive situations. So getting treatment in the athletic training room, during team meetings, sitting on the bench. These are situations where we are looking to require face coverings. As far as the weight room, pretty much in all spaces, we're going to limit the number of people so that we can maintain some social distancing, particularly in the early phases of resocialization, and then modifying some of the training to maintain that small group setting, and then progress as it is safe to do so.
I can talk a little bit about the weight room and just specifically the plan to come back. Chapman Athletics has been part of one of 18 different task forces that the university has implemented in order to put together its plan for coming back safely. The weight room was one of those pieces, and we have addressed some specific requirements, including I know Coach Boesel has met with some experts who have looked at the spaces, the physical spaces that we have on campus to determine some capacities. Our weight room, for example, with 7 weight racks are spaced well enough apart that you could have one athlete at each weight rack and maintain that physical distance. And then we've even talked about athletes that share the same household being able to work out together, and that could increase that capacity as long as they maintain and do all of their exercises within that area. We'll utilize outdoor areas a lot, and so Wilson Field, for example, we've instructed our coaches to really be creative with their workout plans and using body weight exercises and things that they can do outdoors and maintaining physical distancing to allow. But the weight room will have a pretty strict schedule that will require signups, and will be open extended hours to accommodate the numbers of our student athletes that need to get in there.
Pam, while we got you real quick, there was a question about SWOL. When the medical eligibility packet says accepted and it's signed by yourself, is there anything more that the athlete needs to do?
I was actually just going to type a little reply on that one, but if it has been accepted, then that requirement has been completed. The best way to see what has been completed and what still needs to be completed is to go to the paperwork tab on SWOL. There's a specific tab that lists all of the requirements, and there should be an expiration date in each of the little boxes. And if that date is not an expired date, then or that has been filled in, you should be good to go on that particular requirement.
Then a couple questions coming in along these lines as well. Will the athletes be tested, and who will monitor the physical distancing in the weight room and anywhere around our athletic facilities?
So there is discussion over testing. Current discussion is around a home test kit. Nothing has been approved. This is all part of the CU Safely Back, part of the health and safety. So there is a very real possibility of testing in some format. And then we are also going to be incorporating daily screenings, not just of student athletes, but of all students. And as far as the physical distancing, we are hoping that student athletes are motivated to comply to this physical distancing requirement. And then all facilities are going to be supervised by staff. The weight room will be supervised by a coach. The athletic training room will be supervised by an athletic trainer. Practices will be supervised by coaches. And so those individuals will additionally be enforcing some of those social distancing guidelines.
Stephen, can I add to that?
Go for it.
A big part of this is going to be the education of not only our student athletes, but our coaches and staff on educating the importance of the masking, of the physical distancing, of the sanitation protocols, because this is all of us. You're going to make this work. If anybody breaks down along that system, it's just not going to work. So we've got to all get into this together and buy into the education part. And we're going to do our part as an athletic department of educating the students about how important it is for the physical distancing and the masking and the sanitation and so forth. So if we're going to get this done, we're going to get it done as a group. You haven't seen teamwork like we've got to portray here in order to get this thing done. That's for sure.
And our next one, a lot of questions coming in about move-in, specifically for the fall sports that are used to moving in earlier than the rest of the student body. Is that something that is still being looked at? Do we have any dates that we can give any of our student athletes that are probably traveling from outside the area?
I could talk a little bit about that. I just talked to our director of first-year resident housing the other day, and right now, let's just talk about when the students are coming back. So freshmen, their move-in date's going to be from Sunday, August 23rd through Wednesday, August 26th. They've lengthened that day because obviously they can't do the mass numbers like we have in the past and maintain the physical distancing that they're going to need to do. So that's why it's going to be in such a long period of time over those days. So it may take if we come back that same day, it may take our athletes those 3 or 4 days to get in. Returning students are able to come back from August 27th, which is a Thursday, through August 30th, the Sunday. But what I was told that if our team practices are going on or starting up there, we may be able to get those returning students in a little bit earlier so they can join up on the practices. As far as coming back early, that has yet to be determined. That'll again will be determined by the university with guidance from the county and state guidelines and what they say we're able to do as higher education. But as Coach Aiken referred to earlier, we've been able to come back as early as August 10th. We will probably not come back in a physical presence on August 10th, but we may be able to reach out with some type of virtual form to get our athletes kind of starting in the conditioning phase, and that still remains to be seen. But August 23rd is the earliest we're going to be able to move in as freshmen, and you should be getting something from our Department of Housing that's going to state when your move-in time may be.
The next one I'll go to is, are we talking about, have any decisions been made about the winter or the spring sports? Or are we just talking about the fall sports right now?
Right now, we're talking about fall sports only. We've been meeting as an athletic directors group from the SCIAC conference weekly for about the last month and a half. And we just now got through the fall sports, and now we're about to tackle the winter sports of swimming and men's and women's basketball. But again, we'll see what that looks like as we move forward with the releasing of the information from, again, the state and county moving forward. But right now, what we're talking about, conference only competition, is for fall sports only as of today.
And when our facilities do open back up, such as the pool or the other outdoor, is there going to be a restriction on how many people are able to use those facilities at one time? And to piggyback off that, is there any discussion about opening any of the facilities, such as the pool or the outdoor spaces, in the summertime for the athletes to come back and train?
Right now, we are closed through July 31st. We know that. Again, August 10th will be the earliest we can come back. And right now, we've had no guidance on that. But I would be doubtful that we're back physically on our campus on August 10th. Probably won't be much before that August 23rd deadline. As far as the number of people in our facilities, we'll be, again, keeping the physical distancing. So it will be a reduced capacity, both in our pool, on Wilson Field, and we are closing, at least to start the school year, our facilities will be closed to any outside visitors, and it's going to be limited to classes and or intercollegiate teams until we get a better feel for what everything looks like.
And a lot of questions going back to the housing coming in now. Some coming from out of state. Where are they going to stay if they're supposed to come back early? When do we know if they're going to come back early? I know that's a question that's still up in the air, and I'm sure, Coach, you can address that. But that's kind of the gist of a couple of questions that have come in. Where are they going to stay if they do have to come back early on a short notice?
I'll take this.
Okay, go ahead, Coach.
Coach, so first of all, we are in regular communication with housing, and so if we determine that our athletes do need to come back early or will be coming back early, we'll have housing for them. Those decisions kind of need to be made hand in hand. That's a big if, but certainly something that we've been in contact with. I saw the question also about having roommates from the same sport together, and that is another conversation that we have had, and that housing has been open to. They're still housing still trying to figure out who exactly is going to be living on campus, and then once they are able to do that, then the housing assignments will come. But they have been open to that suggestion, and the main reason for that, as it was suggested, is those social circles, and for purpose of contact tracing. When we do start this resocialization process, our teams, our practices are going to be, we're going to be utilizing these pods of no more than 10 students and coaches included, calling that the bubble concept, so to speak. And that includes if you're living together, and that helps us with contact tracing and so forth. So, so yes, we're pushing. We're hoping that we can get some students from the same sports in the same housing situations, and communicating regularly with them on the potential of coming back early and having some housing available.
Question just came in about parents helping their students move in. I think that's a question for the housing department. Can one of you address that?
Yeah, I can address that. One of the stipulations that housing put on is that there'll be no more than 2 outside people other than the students to help move in. So if it's a mom and dad, great, both of them can be there and help move in, but it cannot be more than 2 people that's helping the student move in on move-in day. Let me add something, Stephen, to that too, that our director of housing said. He would emphasize that they bring only the basics right now, that they can always get stuff to them a little bit earlier, or bring stuff to them later. But if we could just keep it to the basics, that way it helped the flow and moving in a little bit better. And that was one of his biggest things to me. And as far as flights from out of the area, he said if you can hold off, we know the sooner you buy tickets, sometimes the cheaper it is. But he doesn't want you to make a airline's appointment for the 23rd, and your move-in date ends up being the 26th, and now you don't have anywhere to stay. You have to go to a hotel for a couple days. So they said if you can hold off and wait for that letter from the housing department to let them know when your move-in day will be.
So for housing, what I'm hearing is, as parents and students, you should look for communication from both the Chapman Residence Life and then be in communication with your coaches about when the start date is, because none of those things are set yet, and there's not much more we can answer about it. So please just look for those communications from your coaches, from Residence Life, and those will hopefully those will answer your questions as time goes on here, especially as our Safely Back plan gets put into motion. So moving on to spectators, a question that keeps coming in is, are spectators going to be allowed in the stands once we do start playing sports?
At this time, there will be no spectators allowed in the stands as we kick off the fall. Again, that could change and get loosened up, but it's also as a SCIAC group, we've made that decision as a SCIAC, so there'll be no spectators allowed at any of the SCIAC competitions unless something changes moving forward. But as of right now, no spectators allowed at any of our fall competitions.
And I'll add to that too. We're working on on bolstering, improving our streaming live, virtual spectating, so to speak, which we have a partnership with Stretch Internet to stream our home games, and so we'll continue to look into ways that we can improve that stream, as that will be the only way, at least initially, for fans to be able to watch those games.
Just had a question come in on preseason games, and part of the SCIAC announcement that came out last week was that teams in the fall will play SCIAC only schedules. So that includes all of our fall sports. They will only play competitions against SCIAC teams. Correct me if I'm wrong, Coach Boesel or Coach Aiken, and that I believe that is what is going to happen. So there will be no preseason games beyond the SCIAC schedule.
That is correct, and part of that's twofold. As us as athletic administrators went to our presidents trying to figure out a way how we can give our student athletes a great competitive experience in the fall. we thought it was imperative that we pared it down to SCIAC only. We have such a great close proximity with all of our conference opponents. The furthest being is a 2-hour drive, so we don't have to worry about overnight travel. So that was a big point. And the other point is we have a consistent health and safety protocol that's being instituted within our conference opponents. So we kind of know what each of the other 8 are doing, and we feel comfortable with that. If we play some outside competition, we don't have quite that control on what their health and safety protocols would be. So we think we'd be putting our athletes a little bit more of a risk of, is somebody coming in with the COVID-19 positive test and then spread it among our team, and then we spread it around our SCIAC constituency. So part of it is just kind of protection and trying to keep our bubble as closed off as possible so we can continue to compete in the fall.
Pam, a couple of questions on SWOL, I guess. One was asking, there was a section in SWOL about screening for COVID-19 for student athletes. If you can address that, and also, address that part first.
So that particular part of the SWOL database is a daily screening tool. So that's not something that needs to be completed at this time. We may or may not use that, as the campus is going to have a screening tool for all students that is going to be part of their daily requirement to come to campus. So we may or may not use a SWOL screening tool, but it's certainly not something that you need to worry about right now.
And then are student athletes going to be required to sign a waiver should they to protect, I guess, liability against contracting the coronavirus? So
there is discussion over a waiver, but it is not specific to student athletes. This is going to be, if there is a waiver that is required, it will be required for all students. You know, the goal of our CU Safely Back is to ensure that all of our students are safe. Student athletes are students first. And so getting everybody educated on what the requirements are, getting buy-in, and maintaining compliance of all of our requirements as far as screening and social distancing, face covering, that's going to be a campus-wide project, not specific to athletics. And so any waiver that came through would be specific to students, not specific to student athletes.
A question just came in about concern over a sport like cross country, where there's a lot of open space, and it seems to be completely spectator free. Would be a challenge, is what the question is asking. I know this is getting into the nitty gritty of the sport, which you probably haven't dove into completely yet, but sports like cross country, tennis, golf, where there's a lot of open space, have the spectator issues been addressed in those sports specifically?
As they haven't been addressed specifically as of right now, with cross country being a fall sport, they would fall under the umbrella of no spectators. But I'm not quite sure, because you're not coming into the stands. Would they be able to stand off away somewhere within the course and still view? I'm not quite sure how that would work. But there is definitely advantages for the cross country, golf, and tennis you mentioned, Stephen, and the fact that those are some sports that we feel like you could maintain a good social distance and kind of a safe zone and continue to compete. And that's why Coach Aiken talked about a little bit about the differing sports and the phased-in approach of non-contact versus contact sports, high risk versus low risk, and what does that look like? So obviously we've got football and men's soccer in the fall that are considered high-risk sports, and then you have cross country, and then some tennis and golf in the fall with their split seasons that are considered low risk. Do you blank them all together and just cancel it all, or are we going to be able to compete, depending on state and county guidelines, in some of our sports that are low risk? That still remains to be seen.
Going back to housing, another one came in. Are athletes guaranteed a dorm regardless of where they live? And again, I think you're going to have to look for a communication from Residence Life, but do you want to kind of readdress this, either Terry or Doug?
Sure. in a normal year, the athletes, when they come back, the only people that's assured a dorm room are the people that's going to be staying in the residence hall. If they come back and they're going to stay off campus, then they need to secure that off-campus residence, and that's where they'll stay. Not everybody comes back and stays in the dorm like in fall camp, like they might do at Division I. So if you are guaranteed, if you're a freshman athlete and you have, or if you're a freshman student athlete and you have a dorm room, you will have a place to stay, as Coach Aiken said, when you come back. If you live off campus, you'll have to secure that space in order that, because that's where you'll stay when you come back. Coach, you have anything more to add to that?
No, no, I thought you covered that. There was actually a couple questions going back. The question was asked, is Chapman going to be switched to remote learning after Thanksgiving break through interterm? That has not been decided yet. I know that is something that they're talking about doing, whether that's at Thanksgiving, the final 2-3 weeks of the semester would be online only, or just ending the semester at Thanksgiving. I know they're considering those options, but that has not been decided yet. There was also a question pertaining to activity classes, weight training classes, so forth. Those, as of right now, are on schedule and moving forward with all of the implementations that we'll need to practice physical distancing, wearing masks, utilizing outdoor space when possible. The capacity of the Argyris Fitness Center is being talked about, and will probably, with the cooperation and agreement of the Student Affairs Office, who manages the Argyris Fitness Center, hopefully be able to just have our classes in there and not have the gym open up to the general student body while we have classes in there, to obviously limit the capacity and allow for physical distancing. But as of right now, conditioning, weight training classes, so forth, are on schedule.
Thanks, Doug, for getting back to those. Now some concern over those high risk sports, or the high contact sports coming in. I want to reemphasize that nothing's really been decided yet. We're really just talking through everything. Coach Bozo, can you go back on that? And we just want to say that nothing's been decided yet. I want you to go through the process of what you were saying with the high risk sports and the phased comeback.
Yeah, we've been following, we've got our CU Safely Back plan as well, but as far as athletics too, we've been following the NCAA resocialization guidelines, and they specifically talk about the high risk, medium risk, low risk sports, and what that phased return could be. And obviously the ones that people talk about the most are our high risk contact sports, which again in the fall would be football and men's and women's soccer. No decision's been made. We're hoping we're moving forward like we're going to have a fall season, and we'll be prepared to change that up as necessary based on, again, state and county regulations, university regulations. But right now we're moving forward like we're planning on having all of our fall sports back come August until we're told differently.
Coach, are volleyball and water polo considered high risk, or are those classified differently?
I believe water polo is, and volleyball is either high risk or medium risk. I can't remember what category they put them in. So they would be, again, they're not telling us that we're not having.
Coach, you somehow got muted there.
Talking about phased approach is, what does it look like for a low risk versus a high risk sport, and what are the mitigating plans you can make in order to make those sports happen?
And then questions about providing face masks. Will Chapman or will the athletics department be providing face masks for the student athletes? for practice and games, or just in general?
I'll take that. So the students will probably be provided at least one face covering. That is all students, not specific to student athletes, will probably be provided with one face covering, and then there will be a requirement for students to ensure that they have sufficient number of face coverings that are clean for however many days they are on campus in a week. So for student athletes, you're on campus almost every day. So it will be necessary for those face coverings to have 6 or 7, or the ability to wash those face coverings in between for each day, so that they are clean and available. Now, we are not talking about requiring face coverings during competition. That is not something that we are talking about. When you're looking at risk of exposure, certainly there is a higher risk of exposure if you're exerting yourself, but we're talking about a 15-minute period is what the CDC is saying, in 6 feet or less, and most sports do not put us in contact with another person for 15 minutes or even close to that. So those face coverings are going to be required during passive exposure, and if it looks like, according to CDC guidelines, that face coverings are going to be required for during active use, then we will have to have further discussion on what that's going to look like.
Face coverings will also be required if we do any traveling. So if we're traveling on a bus or vans, face coverings will be worn during the travel process as well as social distancing in those vehicles.
A question about locker rooms. I don't know if this has quite been addressed or not yet, but will locker rooms be open to the student athletes, and what will be the social distance protocol if they are indeed open?
Right now, everything that we're reading, the advisement is against open locker rooms. So we're going into the season saying no locker rooms will be open. Part of that reason is they want to keep people from congregating in areas, and there's no better place to congregate than a locker room. So they're figuring if we close those locker rooms, you come with your equipment ready to go, and then when practice is over, you go home and shower back at your house or your dorm room. Again, that's today. That could change by the time we get to August, but as right now, we're proceeding like there will be no locker room availability as we start the fall.
And Pam, do you want to address any of that with how it affects training services for practices and games?
As far as
Not
what
having
medical services are not having locker rooms?
Not having to shower. They don't have a locker room to shower in, or I know those
So,
things that you usually require.
Yeah, so showering is going to be a critical part of the hygiene process and limiting any potential spread. So while those locker rooms are not going to be available because of the concern over congregating in locker rooms and the inability to physical distance in locker rooms, we are still going to encourage the student athletes get home and get showered, make sure that they are washing their practice gear, or if we have on-campus laundry, that the practice gear is laundered according to manufacturer recommendations to limit any spread of any bacteria or that COVID-19 virus.
Another question about move-in, June 30th being the date that you're, again, this is a decision that's kind of not in our hands, but the date that people should be expecting to find out what specific day they move in over the 4-day period for freshmen.
I don't have an answer on when they're gonna let people know. I know that June 30th is an important date here at Chapman because our CU Safely Back plan has been, matter of fact, what's today, Tuesday? Monday, what's today, Monday? Was due today. So the executive staff at Chapman will be looking over that CU Safely Back plan. and moving it forward to the president to sign off on it. And I know that they want to do that somewhere around June 30th. So we might be expecting, could be expecting some more answers about exactly what Chapman's going to look like in the fall after June 30th.
Can parents and athletes expect some sort of regular communication from our department, or should they depend kind of what they're getting from the university at this point as we get closer and closer? Coach Bozel, you want to?
Yeah. We could send out, a regular correspondence on it, but again, we're following the guidelines of the university. So the correspondence that the university's putting out will mimic kind of what athletics is doing. So if you see that, hey, athletics is going to be back in the fall, then you'll be getting something from the athletic department, giving more specifics about check-in dates and when sports are going to start. But for right now, I would follow the university CU Safely Back COVID page and just keep an eye on kind of university announcements, because that's what we're going to go by.
I'd also like to add that I send out weekly email correspondence. So if there is something critical like this town hall that needs to be communicated with the athletic population, that's another good source of information. If it's something that's communication worthy, it could also be included in those emails that come out to me from me on a weekly basis.
Pam, for taping and other pre-game and pre-practice, I mean, are your services going to change at all in terms of that? Do athletes need to worry about when they come in any sort of special protocol for those pre-game procedures?
So a couple of things will change in regard to accessing the athletic training room. The first thing that is going to change is appointments are going to be required for all treatment and rehabilitation, as well as injury evaluations, except for those that are emergent in nature. Face coverings are going to be required anytime the athletic training room is accessed. We are also going to limit the amount of pre-practice primping, which includes prophylactic ankle taping and things like that. So braces are going to be encouraged for those individuals who do not have a specific injury that needs to be protected by tape. And if there are those types of situations, we will do a limited amount of taping up on the practice field prior to the start of practice. So yes, our services are going to be limited. We're going to limit the number of people in the athletic training room and encourage physical distancing as well as require face coverings for any treatments or services that are provided by the athletic training staff.
Then a question about soccer and football and the 15-minute rule from the CDC. Does that 15-minute rule still apply to those sports where they're kind of in constant contact for 45 minutes, in soccer's case, at a time?
So those CDC guidelines are passive exposure. They have not really been specific as to active exposure. So passive exposure is sitting on the bench, sitting on a bus during team meetings and things like that. So less than 6 feet for 15 minutes is kind of that guideline. As far as active, we don't have a lot of data. Certainly droplet transmission is going to increase with loud talking, exertion, and things like that. And those are things that we just really can't account for. And that's why the screening protocol is going to be so important. Understanding that if a student athlete does not feel well, that they should not come to campus. Understanding that honest answers during that screening process are critical to making sure that our student athletes and our staff stay healthy. So that's where we get that buy-in, is understanding that everybody has to do their part as far as complying with the regulations, complying with the requests, and doing their part to ensure that they're not trying to suck it up and play, knowing that that could seriously jeopardize not just themselves, but their teammates and potentially the entire season. So that is where that education piece is so important, and that compliance piece comes in.
A question about cross country specifically, again, where the start line and the finish line can become pretty congested. Has that been addressed at all in terms of a staggered start or something along that nature to make sure that we don't put hundreds of athletes kind of in one little spot?
In the Sky Act that has been talked about, it's been talked about reducing the number of participants per team to be able to come to a meet. It's been talked about differing days for male versus female. So again, that there's not so many people in one area. But the finish line has been a topic of discussion, because anybody been to a cross country meet, as they come across there's lots of fluids being expelled as they cross that finish line. So that is a concern, but they're going to try to limit it by limiting the number of people that will be running in a contest.
Will laundry loops be provided to the athletes, or are they doing laundry on their own from now on?
We are still not certain what laundry is going to look like. We know that laundry is going to change. How it is done is going to change. We don't know yet what that's going to look like, but certainly the importance of getting laundry done in a timely manner, and getting laundry done correctly is going to be a point of emphasis. And so once we have a little bit more information on what resources are going to be available, we'll be able to make some decisions in regard to laundry.
Right, well, we've got a few more minutes left. If anybody wants to get another question in, or if somehow it was missed, please type it in right now. Otherwise, I think we've kind of addressed other things that have come in. Again, this isn't nothing set right now. We just wanted to give you guys an update on where we are after the SkyX announcement about the fall sports. And again, that's only fall sports, where winter and spring are still to be addressed by the conference, by the commissioner, by the athletic directors and the coaches. So we are working towards it, and you should look for that CU Safely Back plan to come out in June, or at the end of June here, just about a week. And you should look for communication from different parts of campus in terms of moving in to your residence life, from them specifically, from your coaches. Every sport is going to be different. Even if this were a normal year, every sport kind of reports at a different time, and so you should look for communication from your coaches about when reporting should happen, and they will let you know. They're as anxious as you are to get started, and to get that information out to you.
I'll say one thing about coming back to it. It may not even be the whole team coming back on one particular day. It may be again a phased thing where the freshmen come in for a day or two, and then the sophomores, or however the coach decides it. We're looking at all options, and phasing athletes back to campus seems to be a focus of all of these talks. So I was glad that Pam also addressed just that responsibility that our student athletes, our coaches, our staff, everybody, that shared responsibility of doing the right thing and wearing masks and practicing physical distancing. You know, we'll have the ability to police our student athletes when they're in practice and when they're in the weight room, but when they go home, or when they go to the dorms, or their house is off campus, we can't. And it's so important that they understand that that the decisions that they make could shut down the entire season on the extreme end. And if you ask any of our spring athletes, they'll tell you how that feels. So it's just really important, I think, that everyone understands that coming back to campus, and if we are able to get our sports off the ground with practices and hopefully games, that it could get shut down at any time too, and we would hate to see that happen. So we really just want to encourage you guys to do everything that you can to protect yourselves and protect your roommates, your teammates, your coaches, so forth.
We got one more coming in. I'll let you handle this, Coach Bozel. If only part of the SCIAC comes back and we meet the minimum and only 4 schools are able to compete, will the schedules be altered? And I know that's something, again, it's a specific thing that may not be fully addressed yet, but has that been addressed at all?
Yes, it has, and I'm sure they will be altered. Let's say 4 SCIAC soccer teams are able to play. Well, we just wouldn't play 4 soccer games. We might play each team 3 times to get a workable number of games to judge by. But what I want to say too, as we close here, is that none of us could have dreamt of what this has looked like for us the last 3 months. But just want to let you know that Chapman University and the athletic department has been working extremely hard, putting together a plan to try to make it as safe return as possible, to not only get us in the seats in the classroom, but also get us out on the field, in the pool, on the courts, competing. But I caution, it's not going to look like what it's looked like in the past, either schooling, the socialization around campus, or athletics. It's going to look different, at least for the short term. And again, I don't want to be negative with it, but I was told by our commissioner, by our president, to emphasize the if we are back. That has not been determined, but so if we are back, we're conference only play, but we're just know that we're doing everything in our powers to make it as safe as possible for us to get back in the fall.
There's another question about housing that I wanted to address. I know Doug just responded to it, to whoever submitted it, but there is only 2 students per dorm room coming back in the fall. So you don't have to worry about 3. There's only 2 per dorm room. That's something that the university has already announced. We don't have to wait for anything else for that to come out. And with that, we've got like a minute left. If anybody else has another question, if not, then we will call it a day. And thank you to Pam and Terry and Doug for your time. We know that not all the questions were answered because we don't have all the answers to those questions, and we hope to get those to you as soon as we possibly can. Look again for the CU Safely Back plan to be published later this month, and that will give us a little bit more direction and a little bit more way to find a way to get our athletics back and our athletes safely back and competing. Anybody else? Anything else? Any parting words for us? No. With that, we will say good night to everybody. Thank you again for joining. And any more questions, please find who to direct to or direct it through your coach, and we'll do our best to answer it.